8-year-old Tommy Richardson was playing in his front yard in rural Kentucky when the 90-pound pit bull escaped from the abandoned property next door, its foam-flecked mouth and wild eyes showing the signs of rabies infection that would make it attack anything that moved. The massive dog had already killed 3 cats and a neighbor's chickens, but now it was focused on something much more vulnerable, a small boy who had frozen in terror as the diseased animal charged across the lawn toward him. "Tommy, run!" screamed his mother Sarah from the porch, but her son was paralyzed with fear as 90 pounds of rabid muscle and fury bore down on him with unstoppable momentum. That's when the thunder started. 12 Vietnam War veterans from the Rolling Thunder MC were returning from their monthly ride to honor fallen brothers when they heard the commotion. These battle-hardened men, who had faced enemy fire in the jungles of Southeast Asia 50 years ago, were about to prove that some warriors never stop fighting. They just choose different battles to protect the innocent. Would you like to join us for this incredible journey? Subscribe to our channel now, so you don't miss what happens next. The Rolling Thunder Motorcycle Club had been riding the back roads of Kentucky for over 15 years, their ranks filled with Vietnam War veterans who had found brotherhood and healing through their shared love of Harley-Davidsons and their commitment to honoring the memory of soldiers who never made it home. What had started as informal gatherings among former combat troops had evolved into the most respected veteran organization in the Cumberland Mountains. Sergeant Major William Bear Mackenzie, the 68-year-old former Green Beret who led Rolling Thunder, was concluding their monthly memorial ride when the sound of screaming cut through the rumble of their engines like a knife through steel. Bear had served 2 tours in Vietnam as a Special Forces operative, and his hearing was still sharp enough to distinguish between normal neighborhood noise and the kind of terror that meant someone was in mortal danger. "All units, emergency stop," Bear commanded through his helmet radio to the 12 riders behind him. "Sounds like civilian in distress. Lock and load, brothers. Someone needs help." The response was immediate and automatic. 12 motorcycles came to synchronize stops along the rural highway, as men whose average age was 67 prepared to engage in combat against an unknown threat. These weren't casual weekend riders. They were former soldiers who had served in the longest and most controversial war in American history, men who had learned that courage meant running toward danger when others ran away. "Movement, 2 o'clock, reported Staff Sergeant Eddie Snake Collins, a former Marine sniper whose eyes had kept his unit alive through 2 years of jungle warfare. Large dog, aggressive posture, civilian family on front porch. Through binoculars, the veterans could see the tactical situation developing in the Richardson family's front yard. A massive pit bull, clearly diseased and displaying the aggressive behavior associated with rabies, was charging toward 8-year-old Tommy, who stood frozen in the classic terror response that Bear recognized from combat situations where soldiers faced overwhelming threats. "Jesus Christ," whispered Corporal Mike Doc Murphy, a former Navy medic whose medical training allowed him to recognize the symptoms they were observing. "That dog's got rabies. Look at the foam, the erratic movement pattern, the complete lack of fear responses." Bear felt his blood run cold as he processed the medical assessment, combined with the tactical situation. A rabid animal was essentially a biological weapon, unpredictable, extremely dangerous, and capable of transmitting a disease that was nearly 100% fatal if left untreated. A child facing such a threat had virtually no chance of survival without immediate intervention. "Dismount and advance," Bear ordered, his Green Beret training automatically engaging as he shifted into combat mode. "Standard protective formation around the civilian. This animal is a clear and present danger to innocent life." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The 12 Vietnam veterans dismounted their Harleys with the fluid precision of men who had performed similar movements under enemy fire decades earlier. Their average age might have been 67, but their muscle memory retained the tactical coordination that had kept them alive through some of the most dangerous combat operations of the 20th century. Tommy Richardson remained frozen in his front yard, his 8-year-old mind unable to process the massive predator bearing down on him with foam flying from its jaws and muscles rippling beneath a coat matted with blood from its previous kills. The boy's paralysis was a natural response to overwhelming threat, but it would prove fatal within seconds unless someone intervened. "Sarah, get in the house," shouted Tommy's father Jim from somewhere behind the family home. but his voice carried the desperation of someone who knew he couldn't reach his son in time to provide protection. The pit bull was now 15 feet from Tommy and accelerating when the first Vietnam veteran reached the boy's position. Bear Mackenzie, moving with speed that belied his 68 years, threw himself between the charging animal and the terrified child, his body serving as a human shield against 90 pounds of rabid fury. The impact knocked Bear to the ground, but his sacrifice gave the other 11 Rolling Thunder members the precious seconds they needed to establish a protective perimeter around both Tommy and their fallen leader. These men had faced human enemies in jungle warfare, but none of them had ever confronted a rabid animal operating on pure biological programming to kill everything it encountered. "Circle formation," commanded Snake Collins, his marine training taking over as he positioned himself between the pit bull and the civilians. "Protect the boy and Bear, use whatever you've got." The tactical situation was unlike anything they had faced in Vietnam, but the underlying principle was identical. American lives were in danger, and it was their duty to protect them regardless of personal risk. The fact that the enemy was a diseased animal rather than Viet Cong soldiers was irrelevant. The mission remained the same. Doc Murphy reached Bear first, conducting a rapid medical assessment while keeping one eye on the pit bull, which was now circling the group of veterans with the patient menace of a predator evaluating multiple targets. "Bear's conscious but hurt," Doc reported. "Lacerations on his arms, possible broken ribs from the impact." "I'm fine," Bear gasped, struggling to stand despite obvious injuries. "Protect the boy, that's priority one." The pit bull's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic as the rabies virus affected its brain function. The animal would charge toward one veteran, then suddenly change direction to attack another position, its movements unpredictable and its aggression building with each passing moment. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Sergeant Paul Thunder Jackson, a former artillery specialist whose nickname came from his booming voice during fire missions, had retrieved a steel tire iron from his motorcycle's toolkit and was using it to keep the rabid animal at bay. "This thing's completely insane," he reported through gritted teeth. "No fear response, no pain response. It's like fighting a biological weapon." The comparison was more accurate than Thunder realized. Rabies had evolved over millions of years to turn its victims into aggressive vectors for virus transmission, creating animals that would attack everything they encountered and spread the disease through bite wounds. The pit bull they faced was essentially a living weapon programmed by evolution to kill. Private First Class Tony Wheels Romano, the youngest of the group at 65, was using his motorcycle helmet as an improvised shield while maneuvering to get Tommy to safety. "Kid's in shock," Wheels reported. "We need to get him away from this situation." "No sudden movements," cautioned Doc Murphy, whose medical training included treatment for rabies exposure. "Rapid motion could trigger an attack response. We evacuate slowly and maintain protective formation." The evacuation of Tommy from the kill zone required precision that would have impressed any military commander. The Vietnam veterans moved in coordinated fashion, maintaining a protective barrier around the child, while slowly backing toward the safety of the house where his parents waited in terror. The pit bull's aggression was escalating as its rabies-damaged brain interpreted their movements as territorial challenges. The animal made repeated charges against their defensive line, each attack repelled by men who used whatever weapons they could improvise: tire irons, motorcycle chains, leather jackets wrapped around their arms as shields. "Contact left," Snake called out, as the pit bull launched itself at Corporal Jerry Hawk Williams, a former door gunner whose reflexes had been honed by helicopter combat missions over the Mekong Delta. Hawk caught the attacking animal with a perfectly timed swing of his helmet, sending it tumbling but not seriously injured. The battle continued for what felt like hours, but was actually only 6 minutes. 6 minutes during which 12 aging warriors proved that courage doesn't diminish with age, that military training becomes instinctive rather than forgotten, and that some men will always run toward danger when innocent people need protection. "Package delivered," Wheels announced as Tommy reached the safety of his front porch and his mother's protective embrace. "Civilian secure. All units sound off." The roll call revealed what every veteran had suspected. They had all sustained injuries during the protective action. Bear had taken the worst damage during his initial contact with the rabid animal, but every man showed bite marks, scratches, or impact injuries from their confrontation with a diseased predator. "We need to get that animal contained before it attacks someone else," Doc Murphy declared, his medical knowledge making him acutely aware that rabies could be transmitted to anyone the pit bull encountered after their confrontation. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. The final phase of their operation required a different kind of courage, the discipline to contain rather than kill an animal that posed an immediate threat to public safety. The Rolling Thunder veterans understood that simply eliminating the pit bull wouldn't prevent future rabies outbreaks, but capturing it alive would allow veterinary authorities to confirm the disease and implement appropriate public health measures. "We're going to need animal control and medical support," Bear announced, his command authority intact despite his injuries. "This isn't over until that animal is contained and everyone who had contact gets post-exposure treatment." Private First Class Danny Medic O'Brien, who had served as a field medic in Vietnam before becoming a civilian paramedic, was already coordinating with emergency services through his cell phone. "Animal control, ETA 20 minutes. Ambulance service en route for rabies protocol." The 20-minute wait for professional backup felt like an eternity, as 12 injured veterans maintained a protective perimeter around the Richardson family's property, while the rabid pit bull continued to patrol the area with increasing agitation. Their formation never wavered, their discipline never broke, their commitment to protecting innocent civilians never faltered. When animal control officers arrived with specialized equipment for capturing dangerous animals, they found a scene that would be remembered in their department's history. 12 elderly bikers standing in perfect military formation, all showing obvious injuries, maintaining protection for a family while containing one of the most dangerous animals they had ever encountered. "How did you men manage to control a rabid pit bull for 20 minutes without any fatalities?" asked Dr. Patricia Wells, the county's lead animal control veterinarian. "Same way we controlled hostile territory in Vietnam for 2 years, Bear replied simply. "Discipline, coordination, and absolute commitment to protecting American lives." The aftermath of the confrontation revealed the extent of their sacrifice. All 12 Rolling Thunder members required immediate medical treatment for potential rabies exposure, including a series of painful immunizations that would continue for several weeks. Bear needed surgery to repair damage from the initial attack, and 3 others required stitches for various bite wounds. But when asked if they regretted their decision to intervene, the response was unanimous and immediate. They would do it again without hesitation. "That little boy is alive today because 12 old soldiers remembered their duty," explained Snake Collins to the local news reporter, who arrived hours after the incident. "We didn't stop being protectors when we came home from Vietnam. We just found new people to protect." 6 months after their confrontation with the rabid pit bull, the Rolling Thunder Motorcycle Club had discovered that saving lives came with responsibilities and rewards they never could have anticipated. 8-year-old Tommy Richardson had become their honorary mascot, and his family had become their extended family, creating bonds that went far deeper than the dramatic rescue that had brought them together. Bear McKenzie sat in his favorite chair on the front porch of the Rolling Thunder clubhouse, watching Tommy help Wheels tune up a vintage Harley-Davidson while the sound of other children playing echoed from the community playground they had built with donated labor and materials. The scars from his encounter with the pit bull were still visible on his arms, but they had become badges of honor rather than reminders of trauma. "Uncle Bear," Tommy called out, using the title he had bestowed on all 12 of his rescuers without permission, but with complete authority. "Wheels says you fought in a real war, is that true?" Bear smiled at the directness that only children possessed. Over the past 6 months, he had struggled with how to explain Vietnam War service to a generation that had grown up without understanding the complexity and controversy of that conflict. "Yes, son, we all served in Vietnam," Bear replied carefully. "A long time ago, before you were born, we were soldiers fighting in a jungle very far from here. Were you scared?" Tommy asked with the innocent curiosity of someone who had never faced real danger until a rabid animal had charged across his front yard. "Every day," Bear answered honestly, "but being scared doesn't mean you don't do what's right. Sometimes being scared means you understand how important it is to protect other people." The conversation represented something profound that had developed over the months since the rescue. Tommy's presence at the clubhouse had given the Vietnam veterans something they had never experienced, the opportunity to process their war experiences through the eyes of a child who saw them as heroes rather than participants in a controversial conflict. "Why did you run toward the scary dog instead of running away?" Tommy continued, his 8-year-old logic trying to understand actions that defied normal self-preservation instincts. "Because that's what soldiers do," Bear explained patiently. "We run toward danger when other people need protection. It's not because we're not scared. It's because protecting others is more important than our own safety." Doc Murphy, who had been listening to the conversation while organizing medical supplies for their monthly clinic, added his own perspective. "Tommy, in Vietnam we learned that courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is doing the right thing even when you're terrified." If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a psychologist who specialized in veteran mental health, had been studying the Rolling Thunder MC for the past 3 months as part of her research into community-based therapy for post-traumatic stress. What she discovered challenged conventional understanding of how aging veterans processed their military experiences. The presence of Tommy and his family has created a therapeutic environment that traditional counseling often can't achieve, Dr. Hendricks explained during a presentation to the Veterans Administration. "These men have found purpose and healing through protection of civilians, the same mission that gave meaning to their military service." The relationship between Tommy's family and the Rolling Thunder members had evolved into something unprecedented in veteran support services. The Richardsons had essentially adopted 12 grandfathers, while the veterans had gained a family that valued their protective instincts rather than viewing their military background with suspicion or discomfort. Sarah Richardson, Tommy's mother, had become the unofficial coordinator for the veterans' community service activities, helping them organize medical supply drives for rural families, maintenance support for elderly neighbors, and emergency response services for situations that official agencies couldn't handle effectively. "These men saved my son's life," Sarah explained during a community meeting about veteran services, "but they've done more than that. They've shown our entire community what true service looks like." Her voice carried the emotion of someone who had witnessed heroism firsthand and understood its lasting impact. "I watch Tommy with his uncles, and I see him learning values that you can't teach in school. Courage, selflessness, the willingness to risk yourself for others." Jim Richardson, Tommy's father, had been so impressed by the veterans' character and dedication that he had requested to join their organization despite having no military background. "They represent everything I want my son to understand about courage, loyalty, and protecting others," he told the local newspaper. The Rolling Thunder MC's reputation had been transformed by their protective action. Local law enforcement, which had once viewed motorcycle clubs with suspicion, now considered them valuable community partners. Social service agencies referred families to them for assistance that fell outside traditional bureaucratic capabilities. Sheriff Michael Thompson, a fellow Vietnam veteran who had served in different units but understood the brotherhood that transcended individual service records, spoke about the change in community perception. Before the Richardson incident, people saw them as intimidating bikers. Now they're recognized as what they've always been: dedicated veterans who never stopped serving their country. But perhaps the most significant change was visible in the veterans themselves. Men who had struggled with post-traumatic stress, survivor guilt, and the social isolation that often affected aging warriors had found renewed purpose through their commitment to protecting Tommy and serving their community. Snake Collins, whose sniper skills had made him valuable in Vietnam but seemed irrelevant in civilian life, had discovered new applications for his observational abilities. "I spent 2 years in the jungle watching for threats that could hurt my brothers," he explained during a community safety meeting. "Now I use those same skills to watch for threats that could hurt our neighbors." If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Doc Murphy, whose medical expertise had made him invaluable during their confrontation with the rabid pit bull, had established a mobile medical clinic that served rural communities throughout the Cumberland Mountains. His combination of military medical training and civilian paramedic experience created unique capabilities for emergency health care in isolated areas. "We learned to provide medical care under impossible conditions in Vietnam," Doc explained to visiting medical students from the University of Kentucky. "Now we're using those same skills to help families who can't access traditional healthcare services." The mobile clinic operated out of a converted recreational vehicle that the Rolling Thunder members had purchased and equipped using donations from community supporters. Doc's medical services were supplemented by other veterans who provided transportation, security, and practical support for families facing health crises. Last month, we delivered a baby in a cabin 20 miles from the nearest hospital, Doc recounted during one of his regular reports to the group. The mother went into labor during a snowstorm that blocked all the roads. Thunder and Wheels carried medical equipment through 3 feet of snow while I performed the delivery by lamplight. The baby, born healthy despite the challenging circumstances, had been named William in honor of Bear Mackenzie, creating another connection between the Rolling Thunder family and the community they served. Thunder Jackson had become the Rolling Thunder MC's liaison with local schools, using his commanding presence and military bearing to mentor young people who might be attracted to gang activity or drug involvement. His approach emphasized discipline, respect, and service rather than punishment and intimidation. Kids need to understand that real strength comes from protecting others, not hurting them, Thunder explained to a group of high school students during one of his regular presentations. Military service taught us that lesson, and we're passing it on to the next generation. The mentorship programs that Thunder had developed included job training, life skills education, and character development activities that helped young people develop the discipline and purpose that had sustained the veterans through military service and civilian challenges. 17-year-old Marcus Williams, whose father had been killed in Afghanistan, found guidance and stability through Thunder's mentorship that traditional counseling had failed to provide. Mr. Jackson understands what it's like to lose brothers in war, Marcus explained to Dr. Hendricks during one of her research interviews. He helps me understand that my father died protecting others, and now I can honor him by doing the same thing. Marcus had transformed from an angry, directionless teenager into a confident young man planning to join the military after high school graduation. His transformation demonstrated the effectiveness of veteran-to-youth mentoring that provided both practical guidance and emotional healing. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Wheels Romano had established a motorcycle safety and maintenance program that taught community members how to properly operate and care for motorcycles, while emphasizing the responsibility that came with riding powerful machines. His instruction went beyond technical skills to include the philosophy of brotherhood and mutual protection that defined motorcycle club culture at its best. A motorcycle isn't just transportation, it's a commitment to helping others when they need it, Wheels would tell his students. When you see someone broken down on the side of the road, you stop and help. When you hear someone calling for assistance, you respond. That's what riding is really about. The program had attracted participants ranging from teenagers earning money for college to retired professionals seeking adventure, but all students learned the same fundamental lesson. Motorcycle ownership carried responsibilities to the broader community. Jenny Martinez, a 19-year-old nursing student who had joined Wheels's program after witnessing the veterans' protective action, embodied the values that the Rolling Thunder MC was trying to instill. They showed me that being tough doesn't mean being mean, she explained. It means being strong enough to protect people who need help. Jenny had become the first female associate member of the Rolling Thunder MC, a designation that recognized her commitment to community service and her understanding of the organization's protective mission. Her membership represented the evolving nature of veteran organizations that welcomed civilian partners who shared their values. The annual commemoration of Tommy's rescue had become one of the largest community events in the Cumberland Mountains, bringing together hundreds of families whose lives had been touched by the Rolling Thunder MC's various service activities. The event honored not just the dramatic pit bull confrontation, but the ongoing work that had grown from that terrifying afternoon. 1 year ago, 12 men who had served our country in Vietnam proved that warriors never really retire. Sarah Richardson addressed the crowd during the anniversary celebration. They just find new people to protect and new ways to serve. The anniversary celebration included displays of military memorabilia, demonstrations of motorcycle safety, presentations about veteran services, and testimonials from community members who had been helped by various Rolling Thunder programs. Tommy, now 9 years old and confident beyond his years, had become the unofficial spokesman for the Rolling Thunder MC's youth programs. His presentation about courage and community protection demonstrated the values that his adopted grandfathers had instilled through their example. Uncle Bear taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Tommy told the audience, with the poise of someone who had learned wisdom beyond his years. "It means doing what's right even when you are scared. All my uncles were scared that day, but they still came running to help me." Tommy's speech included details about his regular activities with the Rolling Thunder members, helping with motorcycle maintenance, participating in community service projects, and learning about military history and values. His integration into their activities demonstrated the intergenerational transfer of positive values that the veterans considered their most important mission. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, "What secret do you keep?" The emotional impact of Tommy's speech was visible throughout the crowd, but Bear was most moved by the boys' understanding of the complex relationship between fear and courage that had defined every veteran's military experience. Dr. Hendricks, who had been documenting the therapeutic effects of the Rolling Thunder MC's community engagement, observed the anniversary celebration with professional fascination and personal admiration. "What these men have created goes beyond veteran therapy or community service," she reflected. "They've developed a model for how military experience can be transformed into civilian leadership." The transformation was evident in each veteran's demeanor and purpose. Men who had once struggled with the transition from military to civilian life now had clear missions that utilized their training and experience while serving positive community needs. Hawk Williams, whose helicopter door gunner experience had left him with hearing damage and nightmares, found peace through his work with the Rolling Thunder Emergency Response Team. "Flying over the jungle, I was always looking for threats that could hurt our guys," he explained during one of Dr. Hendricks' interviews. "Now I'm looking for people who need help, and I have a whole team of brothers ready to respond." The psychological healing that had occurred through their protective activities was documented in Dr. Hendricks' research, but it was also visible in daily interactions. Veterans who had once avoided social situations now actively sought opportunities to help neighbors and mentor young people. "Serving others gave us purpose in the military," Bear explained to Dr. Hendricks during one of their regular interviews. "Serving our community gives us that same purpose in civilian life. The mission hasn't changed. We're still protecting American lives." The mission continuity that Bear described had become central to the Rolling Thunder MC's identity and effectiveness. They understood their community service as a natural extension of their military duty rather than a separate civilian activity. Medic O'Brien, whose field medical experience had prepared him for the chaos and urgency of the Pitbull rescue, had become the coordinator for the Rolling Thunder MC's disaster response capabilities. "When the tornadoes hit last spring, we had medical teams and emergency supplies deployed before the Red Cross even knew about the damage," he reported to Dr. Hendricks. The disaster response had demonstrated the veterans' ability to provide rapid, effective assistance during emergencies that overwhelmed traditional social services. Their military training in logistics, communications, and coordination translated directly to civilian disaster relief operations. "We mobilized 47 veterans with medical, mechanical, and construction skills," Medic continued. "We established field kitchens, temporary shelters, and medical stations within 6 hours of the tornado touchdown." The county emergency management director said it was the most effective civilian response he'd ever witnessed. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. 3 years after the Pitbull rescue, the Rolling Thunder MC had become the most respected community organization in their region, with their model being studied by veteran groups, social service agencies, and community development organizations throughout Kentucky and neighboring states. Their success had attracted new members, not just Vietnam veterans, but former soldiers from other conflicts who were seeking the same sense of purpose and brotherhood that the original 12 had found through service. The organization had grown to over 40 active members, while maintaining the discipline and values that had made them effective. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, an Iraq war veteran who had joined the Rolling Thunder MC after completing her military service, brought contemporary combat experience and fresh perspectives to their operations. "The same principles that kept us alive in Baghdad, unit cohesion, mission focus, and protecting civilians, work perfectly for community service," she explained during a presentation to military transitioning programs. The integration of younger veterans with Vietnam-era members had created mentoring relationships that benefited both generations. The older veterans shared wisdom gained through decades of civilian experience, while younger members contributed modern technical skills and understanding of contemporary military culture. Tommy Richardson, now 11 years old and approaching adolescence, remained at the heart of their extended family structure. His academic excellence, athletic achievements, and leadership qualities reflected the positive influence of having 12 military veterans as active mentors and role models. Tommy represents what we fought for in Vietnam, Snake reflected during the 3rd anniversary celebration. A generation that grows up safe, free, and understanding that strength comes from protecting others. The boy who had once been frozen in terror while facing a rabid predator was now confidently speaking to audiences about community service, veteran advocacy, and the importance of intergenerational relationships. His transformation from frightened child to community leader demonstrated the lasting impact of effective mentorship. Tommy's school presentations about veteran appreciation and community service had inspired other students to volunteer for Rolling Thunder projects and develop their own service initiatives. His influence extended beyond personal development to community leadership that multiplied the veterans' impact. Principal Elizabeth Carter of Tommy's elementary school observed the changes in her student with professional and personal admiration. Tommy has developed leadership qualities and social awareness that are extraordinary for his age, she reported to the Rolling Thunder MC during one of their regular coordination meetings. He organizes fundraisers for veteran programs, mediates conflicts between classmates, and consistently demonstrates the values you've taught him. The school had incorporated Tommy's veteran appreciation presentations into their curriculum, creating educational opportunities that helped other students understand military service and develop respect for veteran community members. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The Rolling Thunder MC's influence extended beyond their local community to state and national discussions about veteran services and community-based support systems. Bear had been invited to testify before congressional committees about effective models for veteran reintegration and community engagement. Traditional veteran services focus on treating problems, Bear told lawmakers during a hearing about veteran affairs. Our model focuses on creating opportunities for veterans to solve other people's problems. That gives us purpose and helps our communities at the same time. The congressional testimony had led to pilot programs in other states that attempted to replicate the Rolling Thunder approach, though with varying degrees of success. The authentic commitment and military discipline that characterized the Kentucky group proved difficult to recreate in different cultural contexts. Representative James Sullivan, a Vietnam veteran who chaired the House Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs, was particularly interested in the Rolling Thunder model. What you've created addresses multiple problems simultaneously, he observed during Bear's testimony. Veteran mental health, community emergency response, youth mentoring, and rural health care, all through volunteer service that costs taxpayers nothing. Dr. Hendricks had published peer-reviewed research documenting the therapeutic benefits of the Rolling Thunder model, contributing to academic discussions about alternative approaches to veteran mental health support. Her work had influenced policy recommendations at federal agencies responsible for veteran services. The Rolling Thunder MC demonstrates that healing often happens through service rather than treatment, Dr. Hendricks concluded in her published research. These veterans found purpose and psychological health through protecting others, which aligns with their original military mission. Her research had attracted international attention from countries dealing with veteran reintegration challenges following their own military conflicts. Delegations from Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom had visited Kentucky to study the Rolling Thunder model for potential adaptation to their veteran support systems. The international interest had led to consulting opportunities for Bear and other Rolling Thunder leaders, but they insisted on maintaining their primary focus on local community service rather than becoming professional speakers or consultants. Our mission is here, with our neighbors and our community, Bear explained to Dr. Hendricks when she asked about expanding their influence to national levels. We're not trying to become famous. We're trying to keep being useful. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. 5 years after 12 Vietnam veterans had thrown themselves between a rabid pit bull and a terrorized child, the ripple effects of their courage continued to expand throughout Kentucky and beyond. Tommy Richardson had become a high school honor student whose college application essays focused on the values of service and protection that his adopted uncles had demonstrated throughout his childhood. The Rolling Thunder MC had evolved into a comprehensive community service organization that provided emergency response, veteran support, youth mentorship, elderly assistance, and educational programs. Their annual budget, funded entirely through donations and volunteer labor, exceeded that of many government social service agencies. Tommy's high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patricia Adams, had worked with hundreds of students over her 20-year career, but she had never encountered a teenager with Tommy's combination of academic excellence, leadership abilities, and mature understanding of social responsibility. Tommy Richardson is the most impressive young man I've encountered in 2 decades of education, Mrs. Adams reported during a conference presentation about student leadership development. His mentorship by Vietnam veterans has created character formation that traditional educational programs can't achieve. Tommy's influence on his high school peers was evident in the dramatic increase in community service participation among students in his class. His example and advocacy had inspired over 60% of his classmates to volunteer for various community organizations, with many specifically requesting assignments that supported veteran programs. The Rolling Thunder Youth Corps, established in response to student interest generated by Tommy's advocacy, had become the largest high school volunteer program in the county. Students worked alongside veterans on community projects, learning practical skills while developing understanding of military values and civilian service. Jessica Chen, a 17-year-old student whose parents had immigrated from Taiwan, found purpose and belonging through her participation in Rolling Thunder programs. Before I met Mr. Mackenzie and the other veterans, I didn't understand what it meant to be American, she explained during a citizenship ceremony where Bear served as guest speaker. They taught me that being American means being willing to protect others, even strangers. Jessica's transformation from shy immigrant teenager to confident community leader demonstrated the Rolling Thunder MC's ability to bridge cultural differences through shared commitment to service and protection. But their greatest achievement was visible in the transformation of individual lives. Both the veterans who had found healing through service and the community members who had been helped, mentored, and protected by their ongoing commitment to civilian welfare. Bear Mackenzie, now 73 years old but still sharp and engaged, served as the organization's elder statesman and strategic advisor. The injuries he had sustained during the pit bull attack had healed completely, leaving only scars that served as reminders of the day when 12 old soldiers had remembered their duty to protect American lives. We thought our fighting days were over when we came home from Vietnam, Bear reflected during a presentation to military academy cadets who were studying leadership and service. What we learned is that fighting never ends. You just choose different enemies and different tactics.